I'm 34, married, and thought I had a stable, boring kind of happiness. You know the type, joint Costco membership, fights about throw pillows, synchronized calendars. I'm the kind of person who finds peace in routine. I like knowing what time dinner is, when the laundry gets done, and who's sleeping where. But all of that cracked open about 2 months ago. It started when my little brother, Owen, called me out of nowhere at 2 a.m. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and even before that, we weren't super close. He's 19, practically still a kid in my eyes. We have different dads, grew up mostly apart, and Owen's been bouncing around ever since he dropped out of college after 1 semester. That night, he sounded like a ghost. Said he was in trouble. That he'd been kicked out of his friend's place and had nowhere else to go. I didn't even think twice, I told him to come stay with us. My husband, Nate, was asleep when Owen showed up, all hoodie and shadows and reeking of cigarettes. I tucked him into our guest room, figuring it'd be a few days until he got back on his feet. But a few days turned into a week, then 2, then 6. At first, it was fine. A little awkward, sure, he slept late, didn't always help around the house, and kept forgetting to lock the front door. But I chalked that up to youth. I kept reminding myself, this was temporary. Family looks out for family. What I didn't expect was how quickly Nate and Owen got close. Like, weirdly close. They'd stay up late together playing video games, watching horror movies I couldn't stand, laughing in that quiet, boyish way that made me feel like the outsider in my own home. I'd wake up and find them asleep on the couch together, fully clothed, nothing inappropriate, but it felt off. Intimate, even. Nate started coming to bed later and later. Sometimes not at all. He'd say he fell asleep during a movie, that Owen had had a rough night, that they were just talking. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Until last week. That's when everything shifted. It started with Nate's toothbrush. One morning, I was cleaning the bathroom like I always do on Saturdays. I opened the drawer to refill the toothpaste, and noticed something strange. Nate's toothbrush was missing. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it fell, maybe he left it in his gym bag. But that night, I noticed he didn't brush his teeth in our bathroom. He waited until I was in bed. The next day, I found it, his toothbrush, on the edge of the sink in the guest bathroom. Owen's bathroom. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was in a rush and used that one instead. Maybe he didn't want to wake me. But the thing about small things is, they build. One weird moment turns into a pattern, and once you start seeing the cracks, you can't unsee them. I started paying closer attention. Every night, Nate spent less time with me and more time with Owen. At dinner, he barely talked to me, just mumbled, scarfed his food, and disappeared into the guest room to play some new co-op game with Owen. When I'd knock, they'd pause the game, open the door with matching expressions like I was intruding. And then Nate started sleeping in there. Not every night at first. But often enough. He'd say Owen had a panic attack, or couldn't sleep, or needed someone to talk to. And maybe that was true, Owen didn't talk to me much. He never opened up. But since when did my husband become his personal therapist? I asked Nate if something was going on, just gently, trying not to sound paranoid. He said I was overthinking it. Said Owen was going through a rough patch and just needed support, like a little brother. That this was what being a good person looked like. But something felt off. It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like secrecy. The air in the house had changed, tense, loaded. I'd come home from work and the two of them would stop talking the second I walked in. I'd ask what they were up to, and Nate would answer for both of them, always vague. I felt like a stranger. Like they were the couple and I was the guest. Then came the night I heard them whispering. Around 2 a.m., I got up to get water. As I passed the guest room, I heard them, Nate and Owen, whispering, low and fast. It wasn't an argument. There was laughter. There was something else too, something I couldn't place. The door was shut, but there was a glow of the TV under the crack. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding. And then I heard the lock click. They locked the door. Together. In my house. I didn't sleep that night. And I haven't slept well since. The next morning, I acted normal. I made breakfast like I always do, eggs, toast, coffee. I waited for them to come out of that room together, thinking maybe I'd catch a weird glance, or some sign that something had shifted. But when they finally did emerge, it was like nothing had happened. Nate rubbed his eyes, mumbled good morning, and grabbed coffee. Owen didn't even look at me. He just sat down and started scrolling through his phone like this was his place, not mine. Like I was the outsider in some weird little club I never signed up to be a part of. The lock on that door kept echoing in my head. That day, I searched the guest room when they went out for groceries. I know how that sounds. I know how it makes me look. But I was desperate. I needed proof I wasn't crazy. I didn't find anything obvious, no clothes out of place, no notes, nothing physical that would scream affair. But then I opened Owen's closet and saw it, Nate's duffel bag. The same one he always takes when he travels for work. The same one that used to sit in our closet. It was half open. Inside were his pajamas, an extra phone charger, deodorant. His stuff. In his brother-in-law's room. When they got back, I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to speak without losing it. But Nate noticed something was off. He kept glancing at me during dinner, trying to joke like he used to. Asking if I was okay. I lied and told him I was just tired. Later that night, I watched him from the hallway as he walked toward our bedroom, then stopped, turned around, and went straight into the guest room again. Shut the door behind him without hesitation. That was the moment something in me broke. The next day, I called in sick and drove to my sister's place across town. I needed space to think. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't imagining it. But when I told her what had been going on, the toothbrush, the sleepovers, the whispers, she didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She just looked at me and said, "That's not normal." And then she asked a question I wasn't prepared for. "Do you think something physical is happening between them?" And that's when I realized something truly terrifying. I didn't know the answer. I drove home that night in a fog. My sister had offered to let me crash at her place, but I needed to be in my own bed, or at least pretend things were still normal. I told myself I'd walk in, go to sleep, and deal with everything later. But the moment I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Owen's car was gone. It was nearly midnight. The house was dark except for the glow of the TV in the guest room. I stepped inside quietly, the silence pressing in on me. No laughter. No whispers. Just the soft hum of the fan and a flicker of light under the door. I went straight to our bedroom, half expecting it to be empty again, but to my surprise, Nate was there. Sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed, like he'd just gotten home himself. I didn't say a word. He looked up at me, startled, like he hadn't expected me back so soon. Then he smiled, too quickly. Told me Owen had gone to a friend's for the night, that it was good for him to get out. I asked where he had been, and he said he'd just gone for a drive. Said he needed air. It didn't add up. I stared at him, and he stared back, and for a long time, it felt like a standoff. Then he broke the silence and said something I'll never forget. "You've been acting really suspicious lately. Like I was the one sneaking around. Like I was the one breaking trust." It was such a strange, surreal moment. He stood up, kissed me on the forehead, and told me he was glad I was home. Then climbed into bed and turned out the light. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I lost control of my own life. And then, around 2 a.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. I got up, peeked through the curtains. Owen was back. Alone. I watched as he got out, walked up the path, and let himself in. He didn't tiptoe or sneak. He didn't even check to see if anyone was awake. He walked straight to the guest room, and the door clicked shut behind him. That was it. No words. No hesitation. And Nate? He was already pretending to be asleep. But I could see his eyes were still open. He didn't move. He didn't say a thing. Neither did I. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I made coffee, ate toast I couldn't taste, and watched the sun crawl through the kitchen window like everything was normal. Owen didn't come out of his room. Nate pretended nothing was weird. He asked me if I wanted to go hiking that weekend. Hiking. Like we hadn't spent the past month silently dismantling our marriage in slow motion. I told him I had plans with my sister. He said cool. Just like that, cool, and walked off to take a shower. But I wasn't going to my sister's. I had made a different plan. After Nate left for work, I went into the guest room. I knew I was crossing a line, but something in me didn't care anymore. I needed answers. I couldn't live in this fog another day. The bed was neatly made. Too neatly. Nate's duffel bag was gone. But Owen's closet was cracked open. I took a breath and looked inside. There it was, the bag. Nate's bag. Still here. But not in the same place as before. I opened it again, more carefully this time. His clothes were still inside, but now there were things that hadn't been there before. Cologne. Toothpaste. His favorite hoodie, the one I'd given him for our anniversary. And tucked into the side pocket was a receipt. 1 room. 1 night. A small, anonymous motel near the freeway. Paid in cash. The date on the receipt was from 2 nights ago. The same night Owen had gone to a friend's and Nate had been out for air. I sat down on the bed and just stared at the slip of paper. It didn't scream guilt. Not by itself. But it whispered it, loud enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. When I heard the front door open and Owen come in, I froze. He walked down the hall like he owned the place. I heard the soft shuffle of him dropping his shoes, the crack of his knuckles, the sound of him pouring cereal like it was just another morning in his big sister's house. I stayed in his room, quiet, listening. He didn't come looking for me. He didn't even seem to care if I was home. That was when I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what. That evening, I decided to test something. I told Nate I was going to my sister's again and that I'd be spending the night. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded, gave me a distracted kiss, and turned back to the TV. Owen was in the kitchen, pretending not to listen. But I saw the way his head tilted, just slightly, when I mentioned I'd be gone. I didn't leave. I parked my car 2 streets over and walked back under cover of night like I was robbing my own home. I hid behind the bushes across from our house, crouched low, watching the front door like it was some kind of experiment. I waited. And waited. For 2 full hours. Then, just past 11 p.m., the porch light flicked on. The door opened. And there they were, Nate and Owen, standing in the doorway together, looking out into the night like they were waiting for someone to drive away. Nate stepped outside first, looked around. Then he turned to Owen and smiled, really smiled, the kind I hadn't seen in months. They both went back inside. The door shut behind them. And the porch light went off. I couldn't explain the cold that washed over me. I waited another 10 minutes before moving. I crept up to the house, stuck to the side wall, and peeked through the small slit between the curtains in the living room window. They weren't in there. But the light under the guest room door was glowing. Again. I snuck around to the backyard and crouched low under the window. The blinds weren't fully drawn. There was just enough of a gap to see shadows moving across the room. I couldn't hear them. But I saw Nate's shirt on the floor. Then Owen's. And I stopped breathing. I backed away slowly, almost afraid the air might betray me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they might hear it through the walls. I stumbled all the way back to my car and sat behind the wheel for a long, frozen minute. I had imagined it. I had feared it. But now, I had seen it. Whatever was happening wasn't just emotional closeness anymore. It was something else entirely. And I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do now. I didn't go back home that night. I drove aimlessly until I ended up at a late-night diner an hour away, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who didn't ask questions. I stared at a cup of coffee until it went cold. My phone buzzed twice, once from Nate, once from Owen. I didn't open either message. I couldn't. When the sun came up, I drove to my sister's for real this time. I didn't even knock. She opened the door, saw my face, and just pulled me inside without a word. I told her everything. Well, almost everything. I couldn't bring myself to say what I'd seen through that window. Not out loud. Not yet. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Just sat there, eyes wide, mouth slowly sinking into a frown that deepened with every sentence. Then she asked me the question I'd been trying not to ask myself. Why haven't you left yet? The truth was ugly. Because I was still hoping it wasn't real. That maybe I was wrong. That there was some twisted version of this where it all made sense. Where it wasn't what it looked like. Where I could salvage my marriage, or at the very least, keep it from turning into a story no one would believe. Because who would believe this? Who would believe that a man could move his wife's 19-year-old brother into their home, and then start sleeping in his room? That he'd lie about it for weeks? That he'd smile at her like everything was fine? That she would see them undressing together and still sit there, frozen, unsure of her next move? But most of all, I hadn't left because of the silence. The suffocating, sharp-edged silence that follows betrayal that's too bizarre to explain. The kind that traps you between humiliation and horror. I didn't want to be the woman who said, "My husband is sleeping with my teenage brother." I didn't want that to be my story. But it was. Later that night, I finally opened Nate's message. It was short. Just 4 words. "We need to talk." But the worst part? Owen's message said the exact same thing. Word for word. Copy and pasted. As if they'd coordinated it. As if they were on the same team. I didn't respond. Not right away. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, then turned off my phone and buried it in my bag. My sister tried to talk me into blocking both of them, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening, really happening. I needed to hear it from them, even if it destroyed me. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the last few weeks in my head, twisting every moment into something darker. Nate's sudden change in mood. Owen's smug little half-smiles. The nights I went to bed alone. The door locking behind them. And now the matching messages. It wasn't just betrayal. It felt strategic, calculated. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I texted Nate back, "Be home in an hour." No smiley face. No softness. When I got to the house, everything looked normal. Trash cans by the curb. Porch light still flickering from that busted bulb. Same wind chimes. Same welcome mat. But when I stepped inside, the air felt different. Like the house knew. Nate was already waiting for me in the kitchen. Owen stood behind him, leaning against the counter like he had every right to be there. I didn't sit. I didn't speak. I waited. Nate looked nervous. He ran his hands through his hair and started rambling about how things had gotten confused and complicated. Said he hadn't meant for it to go this far. That he never intended to hurt me. Owen didn't say anything. He just stared at me. Calm. Almost bored. That's when I realized he wasn't ashamed. He wasn't even pretending. Nate kept talking. About how he'd been lonely. About how I'd checked out emotionally months ago. About how Owen had been there for him in a way I hadn't. He never used the word love. He never said sorry. He said connection. He said unexpected. He said real. And then he dropped the final bomb. He wanted to separate. Not just from me. But to live with Owen. Openly. I felt the blood drain from my face. I turned to Owen, waiting for him to flinch. To look away. To crack. But he didn't. He just smiled this slow, lazy smirk, and said, "It's not as crazy as you think." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't some one-time mistake. It was a decision. A choice. They'd chosen each other. And left me behind like a broken piece of furniture. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there, hands shaking, feeling like my body was moving in slow motion while the world twisted into something I couldn't name. My husband, stood beside my 19-year-old brother and told me, with a straight face, that this was what felt right. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just walked out the door. But something in me clicked as soon as I hit the sidewalk. A cold, clear voice in the back of my head whispered, "They think you're weak. That you'll just disappear and let them play house in your life." They had no idea who they were dealing with. I drove straight to my sister's again and told her everything. Every twisted detail. The motel receipt, the toothbrush, the matching texts. Even what I saw through the window that night. She didn't say a word while I talked. But when I finished, she picked up her phone and made 3 calls. One to her lawyer friend. One to a locksmith. And one to our parents. By the next morning, I had a new plan. While Nate was at work, and Owen, predictably, still sleeping till noon, I showed up with the locksmith and changed every single lock on the house. I packed 2 bags, one for Nate, one for Owen. Nothing else. I stacked them neatly on the front porch. Then I left a note on the door. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just 3 lines. "This is still my house. Your things are on the porch. Do not come back." Then I called my lawyer, filed for divorce, and requested an emergency order to remove Owen as a resident due to the, let's call it, inappropriate relationship with my spouse. By the time Nate got home that night, the locks were changed, the alarm was set, and the Ring doorbell was recording his confused, angry face as he tried the knob again and again. I watched it live from my phone. He looked stunned. Betrayed. Good. Let him feel it. Let both of them feel it. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared or confused. I was done. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the end of the week, Nate had sent over a dozen emails. Some pleading, some furious. One even tried to explain how what they had wasn't technically cheating, like redefining the terms would make it less disgusting. Owen stayed silent. No apologies. No texts, just vanished, like a ghost crawling back into the walls. But word got out. My sister told my parents. My parents told his parents. And apparently, Nate hadn't thought that far ahead, because when his family found out, they were horrified. His brother sent me a message saying he was sick to his stomach. His mom called me in tears. But nothing beat the call from my dad. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He just said, "Owen won't be coming home." That was it. One sentence that landed like a brick. I hadn't even asked for that. But hearing it confirmed what I needed to know. They were the ones who would have to deal with him now. Legally, it was messy. Nate's name wasn't on the deed, but he tried to fight me on the separation anyway. Claimed he was emotionally manipulated by Owen, as if my teenage brother had cast some kind of spell on him. It didn't work. The court sided with me. Fast. I kept the house. I cut him out of the bank accounts. The divorce is still processing, but it's already over in every way that counts. As for Owen, I haven't spoken to him. I don't think I ever will again. The boy I thought I was protecting, The kid who showed up on my doorstep with nowhere to go, that person never existed. Or maybe he did, but I'll never see him the same way again. I still have bad nights. I still wake up angry, replaying it all like a film I didn't agree to watch. But I also sleep alone now, peacefully. I light candles in my living room, listen to music they hated, walk around the house barefoot just because I can. I don't flinch when the guest room door creaks. I don't wait up for anyone who won't come home. And sometimes, when it's really quiet, I even laugh. Because the two of them thought they could twist my life into something unrecognizable. Instead, they set me free.